April 8, 1994. An electrician arrives at a house on Lake Washington Boulevard to install a security system. While walking near the garage, he looks through the window of a small greenhouse on the upper floor. He sees a man lying on the ground. He hadn't been alive for days. The man was Kurt Cobain. At 27, he was the frontman of Nirvana and the most famous musician in the world, a position he never seemed comfortable holding. But the story doesn't begin with the sold-out arenas. It begins 3 hours south of Seattle, in a struggling timber town called Aberdeen, a place that shaped the sound the world would eventually fall in love with. Kurt was born on February 20, 1967. At the time, Aberdeen was a gritty logging town on the Pacific coast, defined by its industry and its isolation. His life changed decisively in 1976. He was 9 years old when his parents divorced. Following the separation, his stability of his early childhood vanished. He spent the next several years moving between households, living with his mother, then his father, and eventually drifting between the homes of various relatives. He never stayed in one place for long. Family members later recalled the shift in his personality. The divorce didn't just uproot him, it left him withdrawn and emotionally unstable. During his teenage years, he struggled at school and felt increasingly alienated. Just weeks before graduation, he dropped out. Shortly after, his relationship with his mother collapsed. She gave him an ultimatum: find a job or leave. When he didn't, she packed his belongings and moved him out. For a time, Kurt lived wherever he could, sleeping on French couches, sneaking back into his mother's basement, or as he later claimed, sleeping beneath a bridge over the Wishkah River. Amidst the instability, music became his primary focus. He had experimented with the piano as a child, but the guitar became his true outlet. His aunt supported the interest, providing him with an instrument and a place to practice. He listened obsessively, absorbing the melodies of the Beatles, R.E.M., as well as the raw defiance of punk bands like the Sex Pistols and Black Flag. He was also heavily influenced by a local band called the Melvins, who introduced him to the heavier, abrasive sounds that would eventually define grunge. For Kurt, music wasn't just a hobby, it was an identity. In the mid-80s, Kurt recorded a rough demo under the name Fecal Matter. He passed the tape to a local bass player named Chris Novoselic. It took some time for Chris to listen, but once he did, he recognized the potential. The two connected over shared musical tastes and similar frustrations with their small-town surroundings. Their collaboration was built slowly on rehearsal, persistence, and a shared sense of isolation. In 1987, they officially formed Nirvana. They cycled through several drummers, while Kurt and Chris remained the core of the band. They played small shows, recorded demos, and became a fixture in the emerging Pacific Northwest scene. In 1989, they released their debut album, Bleach. It was heavy and unrefined, but tracks like About a Girl hinted at Kurt's growing sense of melody. However, as the band's profile rose, so did Kurt's experimentation with drugs, a habit that began in his teens and was now beginning to intensify. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in 1990, drummer Dave Grohl. His power and consistency stabilized the lineup, and with producer Butch Vig, the trio recorded Nevermind. Released in September 1991, the album wasn't expected to be a massive hit. But after a European tour, sales exploded. Smells Like Teen Spirit went into heavy rotation, and Nevermind surged to the top of the charts. The success was sudden and overwhelming. In a matter of months, Nirvana became the most visible band in the world. Kurt, who had spent his life on the margins, was now the center of relentless media attention. The pressure of interviews, tours, and global expectations began to take its toll. In 1992, they released Incesticide, a collection of B-sides that reinforced the darker, more abrasive side of Kurt's writing. That same year, Kurt married Courtney Love, the lead singer of Hole. Their relationship was intense and highly publicized. In August 1992, their daughter Frances Bean was born. But behind the scenes, Kurt's heroin use had escalated from experimental to daily. He also suffered from chronic stomach pain, an ailment he often cited as the primary reason for his continued drug use. In 1993, the band released In Utero. Recorded with producer Steve Albini, the album was a deliberate rejection of the polished sound of Nevermind. It was harsh, confrontational, and deeply personal. Songs like Milk It featured lyrics that pointed towards self-destructive thoughts, a subject that wasn't new to Kurt. At least 2 relatives on his father's side had died by suicide years earlier. The theme existed in his family history long before it appeared in his lyrics. For the In Utero tour, the band added guitarist Pat Smear to thicken their live sound. But despite the support, Kurt's condition was deteriorating. In March 1994, while in Rome for a break, Kurt ingested a massive combination of alcohol and rohypnol. It was his first known suicide attempt. He fell into a coma for 20 hours, but eventually recovered and returned to Seattle. The incident sparked an intervention by his family and friends. Under pressure, Kurt entered a rehab facility in Los Angeles on March 30. 2 days later, he climbed over a wall and disappeared. Back in Seattle, Kurt went underground. Those close to him searched the city, but no one could find him. In the final period of his life, he became fixated on the story of Frances Farmer, a Seattle actress whose life had been dismantled by the media and institutional control. Kurt felt a dark kinship with her story, believing he was experiencing the same dismantling. He even tried to contact William Arnold, the author of a book on Farmer's life, apparently seeking understanding or guidance. Arnold, unaware of who was calling, avoided the contact. On April 5, 1994, the trajectory that began in Aberdeen ended in a Seattle greenhouse. Kurt Cobain was 27 years old. He left behind a suicide note, a young family, and a band at the height of its power. While various theories have circulated over the decades, the official record and those closest to him maintain that he took his own life. But the music didn't stop there. Bleach, Nevermind, Incesticide, and In Utero didn't just influence alternative rock. They shifted the direction of popular music, bringing a more abrasive, honest sound to the forefront. Cobain wasn't a technical virtuoso, but he had a rare ability to translate tension and exhaustion into a language people could actually recognize. He was a unique voice who made a generation of outsiders feel understood. And that is why, 30 years later, the world is still listening.